The night of October 31st, 2011, began like any other Halloween in Boston. The air was crisp with the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke, a festive energy buzzing through the city's historic streets. For 22-year-old art student Julianne Wells, it was a night of celebration with friends, a brief respite from her demanding studies at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. She was a vibrant young woman, her laughter as bright as the costume she wore, a modern take on a flapper, complete with a sequined dress and a feathered headband. But as the evening waned and friends parted ways, Julianne began a journey home that would become her last, a descent into the city's sprawling subway system from which she would never emerge. Eleanor Wells remembers her daughter's last phone call with haunting clarity. It was just after 11:30 p.m. She said, "Hi, Mum, just heading home now. The party was fun, but I'm beat. I'll see you in the morning," Eleanor recalls, her voice a fragile whisper even after all these years. "I told her to be safe, to text me when she got to her stop. I said I love you." I never got to hear her say it back. The call cut out just before she could. "I just assumed it was the subway tunnel." That simple, loving exchange, a routine part of their daily lives, was the final thread connecting a mother to her child before it was inexplicably severed. Julianne, known to her friends and family as Julie, was last seen entering the Park Street station, a bustling nexus where the red and green lines converge beneath the nation's oldest public park. The Boston Common, the station, with its labyrinthine tunnels and echoing platforms, is a city within a city, a place where thousands of lives intersect daily. On this night, it was a chaotic mix of late-night commuters and costumed revelers. Julie swiped her Charlie card at the turnstile at 11:47 p.m., a moment captured by the station's security cameras. The grainy, black-and-white footage is the last definitive proof of her existence. The initial hours of her absence were filled with annoying anxiety that slowly curdled into pure terror for her parents, David and Eleanor Wells. When Julie didn't return to her small apartment in Cambridge, which she shared with a roommate, and failed to answer her phone the next morning, her roommate called them. David drove into the city, his heart pounding with every mile, hoping to find her sleeping in, her phone simply dead. But her bed was untouched, her art supplies laid out on her desk for a project she would never start. The silence in her apartment was deafening, a void where her vibrant presence should have been. Detective Michael Corrigan of the Boston Police Department was assigned the case, an old-school cop with 2 decades on the force. He had seen his share of strange disappearances, but this one felt different from the start. There was no note, no sign of a struggle in her apartment, no unusual activity on her bank accounts. Corrigan explains, his face etched with the memory. She was on the grid one moment, phone calls, a subway pass, swipe, and then, poof, she was off it completely. It was like she stepped onto that train platform and simply evaporated into thin air. The search began in earnest, a frantic effort against a ticking clock. Police canvassed the area around Park Street Station, their searchlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. K-29 units sniffed through the tunnels after the trains stopped running, their barks echoing in the empty darkness. Volunteers and friends spread out across the city, plastering telephone poles and coffee shop windows with flyers bearing Julie's smiling face. Her image became a ubiquitous, silent plea on the streets of Boston, a ghost in the urban machine. The CCTV footage was pored over countless times, each pixel scrutinized for a clue. It showed Julie walking down the stairs to the southbound platform, her silver dress shimmering under the harsh fluorescent lights. She appears to be alone, looking at her phone as she walks. She stands near the edge of the platform, blending in with a small crowd waiting for the last Red Line train, but the camera angle was poor, partially obstructed by a pillar. It captured her arrival on the platform, but it never clearly captured her departure. Witnesses from the station that night were unreliable, their memories clouded by the late hour and the distracting spectacle of Halloween costumes. Some thought they saw a woman in a flapper dress arguing with a man in a wolf mask. Another commuter recalled seeing her laughing with a group of friends. A third swore she never got on the train at all, but instead walked toward the far end of the platform, towards a dimly lit maintenance tunnel. The conflicting accounts created a fog of confusion, pulling the investigation in a dozen different directions at once. That as the first day turned into the second, and then a week, the hope that had fueled the initial search began to fade. replaced by a cold, heavy dread. The city moved on, the festive Halloween decorations replaced by the first signs of Thanksgiving. But for the Wells family, time had stopped. Their world had shrunk to the size of their missing daughter, their lives now defined by a single, agonizing question. What happened to Julie in the depths of Park Street Station? The last train had long since pulled away, its red taillights disappearing into the blackness of the tunnel. For Julianne Wells, it was a final destination, a departure with no scheduled arrival. The mystery of her disappearance became one of Boston's most enduring cold cases, a chilling story told in hushed tones by commuters waiting on that same platform. For 14 years, the station held its secrets close, its concrete walls silent witnesses to her last known moments, until a crack in the foundation of the old station would finally begin to tell the tale. In the immediate aftermath of Julie's disappearance, Detective Michael Corrigan and his team launched a full-scale investigation, treating Park Street Station as a potential crime scene. The entire station was a chaotic mess of possible evidence and red herrings. They meticulously logged every discarded item, from candy wrappers to single gloves, hoping for a thread to pull. The sensory overload was immense, the lingering smell of stale popcorn, the screech of train wheels on the tracks, the constant hum of ventilation systems. It was a place designed for transit, for movement, not for a person to simply cease to be. The primary piece of evidence, the CCTV footage, became both a beacon of hope and a source of profound frustration. Corrigan's team created a minute-by-minute timeline of Julie's movements. At 11:47 p.m., she enters. At 11:49 p.m., she is seen on the southbound Red Line platform. The train to Ashmont, her likely destination, arrived at 11:52 p.m. and departed at 11:53 p.m. Julie is visible in the crowd, but as the train doors open, a crush of passengers, including several individuals in bulky costumes, obscures the view. The camera never definitively shows her getting on that train. Investigators spent days interviewing every known person who was on that platform. They released images of other commuters seen in the footage, asking the public for help. A handful of people came forward. One woman, a nurse, heading home from her shift, remembered the girl in the sparkly dress. She seemed fine, the nurse stated in her interview. Just another young person on her phone. I remember thinking her costume was pretty. I got on the first car. She was further back. I didn't see her again after that. This account, like many others, was a dead end, confirming Julie's presence but offering no clue as to her fate. Attention quickly turned to Julie's personal life, starting with her boyfriend of 6 months, Ben Carter. Ben was a musician, and by all accounts, their relationship was passionate but occasionally turbulent. He told detectives they had a small disagreement earlier in the evening, but had made up via text message before she headed for the subway. He provided a solid alibi, verified by his bandmates, that he was breaking down their equipment at a bar across town at the time of her disappearance. Still, the shadow of suspicion lingered, a heavy weight on the young man. People want the boyfriend to be the guy, Corrigan reflects. It's the simplest answer, and we looked at him hard. We checked his phone records, his car's GPS. We talked to his friends. Ben was emotional. He was distraught, but all the evidence we could find suggested he was exactly where he said he was. The argument they had was minor, about something silly. It wasn't the kind of thing that leads to a disappearance. We couldn't build a case, not even a weak one. Ben's cooperation was unwavering, but the public scrutiny was relentless, turning his grief into a public trial. The police divers were called in to search the Charles River, a grim but necessary procedure. They scoured the waters near the Longfellow Bridge, which the Red Line train crosses after leaving the station. The cold, murky depths offered up nothing but old tires and shopping carts. The search of the subway tunnels themselves was equally fruitless. For miles in either direction from Park Street, search teams walked the tracks, peering into every alcove and utility closet. The only signs of life were the rats scurrying in the darkness and the hum of the third rail. Forensic analysis of the grainy surveillance footage yielded no additional leads. Enhancement techniques of the time were limited, and the poor quality of the video made it impossible to identify other faces in the crowd with any certainty. The man in the wolf mask, mentioned by one witness, was never identified, likely just another anonymous partygoer lost to the night. The digital ghost in the machine offered no answers, her flickering image a constant reminder of the technological limitations that hampered the search. As days bled into weeks, the investigation's focus broadened. Detectives explored the possibility that Julie had decided to disappear on her own. They checked bus and train manifests out of Boston, flagged her passport, and spoke to friends about her state of mind. Everyone described her as happy and future-oriented, excited about an upcoming gallery submission. The idea that she would willingly walk away from her life, her family, and her art seemed entirely out of character. It was a theory they had to investigate, but one that no one who knew her truly believed. The case file grew thicker with reports of false sightings and dead-end tips. A psychic called in, claiming Julie was being held in a basement in Quincy. A truck driver reported seeing a girl matching her description at a rest stop in Connecticut. Each lead was dutifully followed, each one chipping away at the limited resources and the morale of the investigators. The trail was growing colder with every passing hour, the initial flurry of activity slowing to a frustrating crawl. By Christmas of 2011, the active search for Julianne Wells was unofficially over. The incident room at the precinct was dismantled, and the case was relegated to a filing cabinet, joining the ranks of the city's other unsolved mysteries. Detective Corrigan would keep her photo on his desk for the rest of his career, a silent testament to the one that got away. The machine of the city's justice system had ground to a halt, leaving only the ghost of a girl in a silver dress, forever frozen in a grainy video frame, waiting on a platform for a train that, for her, would never arrive. To understand the void Julianne Wells left behind, you have to understand the vibrant life she lived. She was not just a name on a missing persons poster. She was a daughter, a friend, an artist whose world was a canvas of color and emotion. Born and raised in the quiet Boston suburb of Lexington, Julie was the only child of David and Eleanor Wells. From a young age, her passion was art. Her parents' home is still a gallery of her evolution. From childhood crayon drawings on the refrigerator to the sophisticated oil paintings that now hang in their living room, preserved just as she left them. Eleanor Wells walks through her home, her hand gently brushing against a framed charcoal sketch of a city street scene. This was her favorite medium, she says, a sad smile touching her lips. She loved the grit of charcoal, how it could be both messy and precise. She said it felt like Boston, full of history and sharp edges, but beautiful if you knew how to look. Julie's art was her voice, a way for a naturally introverted girl to express the world as she saw it. It was a world full of life and detail, a stark contrast to the featureless void she had vanished into. In flashbacks, we see glimpses of this life. A teenage Julie with paint-smeared jeans, laughing as she works on a mural at her high school. Julie on her first day at Mossad, her eyes wide with excitement as she stands in the heart of the city she adored. We see her on a picnic with her boyfriend, Ben, in the public garden, sketching the swan boats as he plays his guitar softly beside her. These memories are vivid, filled with the sounds of her laughter and the bright, hopeful energy that radiated from her. They are the echoes of a life that was still being written. Her father, David, a quiet man by nature, found his grief turned inward. While Eleanor became the public face of the search, David retreated into his work as an architect, finding solace in the rigid logic of blueprints and stress calculations. It's hard to talk about, he admits, his gaze fixed on a photograph of Julie on his desk. I see the structures I design, how every piece has to connect, how there's a reason for everything. With Julie, there's no reason. There's no blueprint for this kind of loss. A foundation has been removed, and the whole structure is unstable. Her friends remember her fierce loyalty and her quirky sense of humor. Her college roommate, Sarah, recounts how Julie would often get lost in her work, forgetting to eat or sleep, fueled only by coffee and her passion. She was incredibly driven, Sarah says. She had this plan. She wanted to graduate, get a small studio space in the South End, and just paint. She wasn't after fame or money. She just wanted to create things that made people feel something. It's the cruelest irony that her own story is now this thing that makes us all feel so much pain. The apartment she shared with Sarah was a testament to her personality. The walls were covered in her art, from quick, expressive studies to nearly finished canvases. Her favorite books on art history were stacked on the floor, and a collection of found objects, unusual stones, pieces of sea glass, a strangely shaped piece of driftwood were arranged carefully on her windowsill. It was a space brimming with life and creativity, a sanctuary that was violated by her sudden absence. Her roommate moved out a few months later, unable to bear the weight of the silence. Julie's relationship with Ben Carter, while scrutinized by police, was by most accounts a source of great happiness for her. They had met at a small concert and bonded over their shared artistic passions. He supported her work, and she was his biggest fan. "She was my muse," Ben says quietly in a recent interview, his eyes still holding a deep sadness. "Every song I wrote back then, I wrote for her. When she disappeared, the music died too. For a long time, I couldn't even pick up my guitar. The silence was just too loud." Her last completed painting, which now hangs above the fireplace in her parents' home, is a hauntingly beautiful cityscape of Boston at dusk. It's a view from a high vantage point, the city lights twinkling below like scattered jewels. The sky is a deep, brooding purple, and there's a sense of profound loneliness to the piece, a feeling of being detached and watching the world from afar. After her disappearance, her family and friends couldn't help but see a premonition in the melancholy beauty of the work. The investigation had looked for a reason, a crack in the perfect facade of her life. They searched for signs of depression, a secret life, a hidden enemy, but they found nothing. Julianne Wells was a young woman on the cusp of realizing her dreams, grounded by a loving family and a supportive circle of friends. She was happy, stable, and in love. She was, by all measures, the least likely person to vanish without a trace. And so, the question that plagued Detective Corrigan and her family was not just where she went, but why. How could a life so full, so promising, so deeply rooted in the world, be uprooted so completely? The echoes of who she was only made her absence more profound, her silence more deafening. A vibrant portrait of her life made the blank canvas of her disappearance an impossible contradiction to accept, a mystery that grew deeper and more painful with each passing year. With no forensic evidence and no body, the initial investigation into Julie's disappearance devolved into chasing shadows. Every theory, no matter how outlandish, had to be considered. The focus inevitably narrowed onto the people closest to her, a standard procedure that nevertheless felt like a violation to a grieving family. Every relationship was dissected, every friendship scrutinized, every casual acquaintance questioned. The police were searching for a motive, a hidden fracture in Julie's seemingly perfect life that could explain the impossible. The most intense scrutiny fell upon her boyfriend, Ben Carter. Despite his verified alibi, detectives are trained to know that alibis can sometimes be manipulated. They interviewed his bandmates separately, cross-referencing their stories down to the minute. They combed through months of text messages and emails between Ben and Julie, searching for any hint of discord or escalating conflict. "We found a few arguments," Detective Corrigan explains, "the kind every couple has. Disagreements about plans, a flash of jealousy here and there. But there was no pattern of abuse, no threats, no final, explosive fight. Their last text exchange was loving." Ben Carter found his life turned upside down. His grief was compounded by suspicion. He was followed by reporters, his photos splashed across tabloids next to headlines that screamed the grieving boyfriend. And did he know more? He lost friends and was forced to drop out of his music program for a semester due to the stress. "It was a nightmare," Ben recounts. "You're trying to process the worst thing that has ever happened, and people are looking at you like you're a monster. I loved her. I just wanted her back. I would have done anything to find her, and all I could do was answer the same questions over and over again." With the focus on Ben yielding nothing, the investigation broadened to other, darker possibilities. Could it have been a crime of opportunity? Park Street Station, for all its daily traffic, has secluded corners and a history of crime. Police profiled potential predators known to frequent the subway system. They re-examined old cases of assault or abduction that had occurred on MBTA property, searching for a similar modus operandi, but no matches were found. Julie's case remains stubbornly unique, isolated from any discernible pattern. The theory of a chance encounter with a dangerous individual was a terrifying one for the Wells family. It meant that Julie was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim of random, senseless violence. Investigators looked into recent releases from nearby prisons and mental health facilities. They cross-referenced a list of known offenders, with transit employee records, looking for anyone who might have had access or a reason to be in the station late on Halloween night. The sheer number of possibilities was overwhelming, a vast sea of potential suspects, with no evidence to connect any of them to Julie. Anonymous tips flooded the police hotline in the first few weeks, each one a whisper in the dark that had to be pursued. One caller claimed to have seen Julie being forced into a van outside the station, but a review of all street-level cameras in the vicinity showed no such vehicle. Another tip pointed to a disgruntled professor at her college, but the accusation proved to be baseless, born of a student's personal grudge. These false leads were not just time-consuming, they were an emotional roller coaster for the Wells family, a cycle of soaring hope and crushing disappointment. One of the most perplexing elements was the lack of any digital footprint after 11:47 p.m. Her phone never pinged another cell tower. It was never turned on again. Her bank cards were never used. Her social media accounts fell silent. In the modern world, it is incredibly difficult to exist without leaving some kind of digital trace. For Julie's to end so abruptly suggested a sudden and catastrophic event, one that either destroyed her phone or immediately took her out of commission. It was a digital silence that screamed foul play. The investigation even delved into the more obscure corners of the city. They spoke to the community of homeless individuals who often took shelter in the subway system, asking if they had seen anything unusual. They explored rumors of unsanctioned tunnel parties held by urban explorers in the disused sections of the MBTA's vast network. The search led them down countless rabbit holes, each one ending in a dark, empty tunnel. The city was full of whispers and shadows, but none of them would resolve into a clear image of what happened to Julie Dott. After 6 months of intensive investigation, Detective Corrigan had to face a grim reality. They had exhausted every lead. Every theory had been explored to its logical, and sometimes illogical, conclusion. There were no new witnesses, no new evidence, no new avenues to pursue. The case, which had started with such urgency, was now officially stalled. The file remained open, but it was moved from the active investigation board to the cold case archives, a thick manila folder filled with unanswered questions and unresolved pain. For the Wells family, the declaration that the case was going cold was a devastating blow. It felt like the world was giving up on their daughter. The shadows that had consumed the investigation now seemed to be closing in on them, threatening to extinguish the last embers of hope. The whispers of what might have been were all that remained. The police had looked into the darkness for an answer, but the darkness had simply stared back, offering nothing but an unnerving, profound silence. The years that followed the freezing of Julie's case were a study in quiet agony for Eleanor and David Wells. The world kept spinning, seasons changed, and the city of Boston continued its relentless forward march, but their lives were frozen in the autumn of 2011. The passage of time does not heal all wounds. Sometimes, it merely deepens them, transforming sharp pain into a chronic, aching sorrow. For 14 years, they existed in a state of suspended animation, caught between the ghost of the past and a future they could never embrace. Eleanor became a reluctant activist, a member of a club no one ever wishes to join. The families of the missing Shay channeled her grief into action, working with national organizations to raise awareness for cold cases. She gave interviews on the anniversary of Julie's disappearance each year, her face becoming a familiar symbol of enduring hope and maternal love. "If I stop talking about her, it's like she disappears all over again," Eleanor said in a 2018 interview, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I have to be her voice. I have to make sure no one forgets my daughter." David, in contrast, retreated further. He sold his architecture firm, unable to bear the social interactions and the constant pitying looks from colleagues. He took up a solitary job as a draftsman, working from a home office where he could control his environment. His silence was not a lack of love, but a different manifestation of grief. He meticulously maintained Julie's room, dusting her art, supplies and keeping her books in order, as if preserving the space would somehow preserve the possibility of her return. It was his silent, daily vigil. Every October, the approach of Halloween would bring a fresh wave of pain. The festive decorations and cheerful costumes that filled the stores were a cruel reminder of the night their world fell apart. They would leave the city during that week, unable to bear the sight of Park Street Station or the revelers that thronged the streets. They would drive to the coast of Maine, sit by the ocean, and talk about Julie, sharing memories in the salty air, finding a small measure of peace in their shared isolation. Detective Michael Corrigan retired in 2019, but he never truly left. The Julie Ann Wells case behind took the case file home with him, a thick binder of reports and photographs that he would review periodically, hoping a fresh look would reveal something he'd missed. He kept in touch with the Wells family, calling them every year on the anniversary. "It's the one case that haunts me," Corrigan admitted. "We had nothing. It's the not knowing that gets you. It's a weight that you carry, a question mark that never straightens into a period." For Ben Carter, the years brought a slow, painful healing. He eventually finished his music degree and moved to the West Coast, seeking a fresh start away from the city that held so many ghosts. He fell in love again, got married, and started a family. But the shadow of what happened to Julie never entirely left him. He rarely spoke of it, but his wife knew the story, understanding the source of the deep-seated sadness that would sometimes cloud his eyes. He had been cleared by the police, but in his own heart, he still carried a burden of what-ifs. The city of Boston, too, held the memory, though it faded with time. Julie's story became a piece of local lore, a cautionary tale for young people, a ghost story whispered on the subway. The flapper ghost of Park Street, some called it. Missing person posters, yellowed and torn, eventually disappeared from the telephone poles, replaced by new flyers for concerts and lost pets. The city's collective memory is short, and Julie's vibrant face slowly faded into the background noise of urban life. The Wells family's hope, however, never fully extinguished. They clung to stories of cold cases solved after decades, of new technologies that could unlock old evidence. The rise of forensic genealogy and advanced DNA testing offered a new, tantalizing possibility. They provided their DNA to national databases, praying for a miracle, for a connection to be made to unidentified remains found somewhere across the country. Every phone call from an unknown number would make their hearts leap with a mixture of hope and terror. 14 years is a lifetime. A child born on the day Julie disappeared would be starting high school. The world had changed immeasurably. Smartphones became ubiquitous, social media reshaped communication, and the grainy CCTV footage that was the best evidence in 2011 looked archaic. For 14 years, the silence from Park Street Station was absolute. The concrete and steel held their secrets, and the daily rumble of the trains was the only sound that filled the void. Then, in the autumn of 2025, during a routine infrastructure upgrade project, the silence was finally broken. It didn't happen with a dramatic confession or a long-awaited phone call. It started quietly, with a maintenance worker, a flashlight, and a hairline fracture in a place no one had thought to look. A tiny crack in a forgotten wall, deep in the bowels of the station, was about to rip the apathetic calm of the cold case wide open, proving that even after 14 years of silence, the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface. Autumn 2025, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, the MBTA, had initiated a massive, long-overdue modernization project for its oldest stations. Park Street, the venerable heart of the system, was undergoing a significant structural and cosmetic overhaul. The work was noisy, dusty, and disruptive, a daily grind of jackhammers and welding torches. For the commuters rushing through, it was a temporary inconvenience. For the cold case of Julianne Wells, it was an unwitting catalyst, the first stirrings of an earthquake that had been dormant for 14 years. The work crew was tasked with inspecting the station's foundational integrity, a job that took them into the forgotten nooks and crannies of the century-old structure. They ventured into dusty utility corridors and sealed off storage areas that hadn't been opened in decades. It was in one of these spaces, a grimy, long-abandoned storeroom at the far southern end of the Red Line platform, that a worker named Marco Diaz noticed something unusual. He was checking the integrity of a load-bearing wall, his flashlight beam cutting through the thick, musty air. Marco was running his hand along the grimy, tiled surface when he felt it. A subtle give. He shone his light closer and saw a hairline crack snaking down from the ceiling, almost invisible beneath layers of grime. It wasn't a structural issue, more like a poorly patched seam. But what caught his attention was a strange, hollow sound when he knocked on the wall next to it. It was different from the solid thud of the surrounding concrete and brick. His curiosity piqued. He pressed his ear against the cold tile, listening intently. The discovery was reported to his foreman, who initially dismissed it as nothing. These old stations were full of strange architectural quirks, but Marco was insistent. He had worked in construction his whole life, and his gut told him this was not just an anomaly. Reluctantly, the foreman authorized a small, exploratory drilling. As the drill bit pierced the tile and the plaster behind it, a peculiar smell wafted out, not the expected scent of dust and damp, but something else, something faintly organic and deeply unpleasant, a smell of long decay. The incident was elevated to the MBTA authorities, and given the station's history and the unusual circumstances, someone had the presence of mind to make a call. The Boston Police Department was notified of the strange finding. The report landed on the desk of Detective Isabella Rossi, a sharp, tenacious investigator who had recently taken over the leadership of the BPD's cold case unit. She had read the Julianne Wells file, as she did with all the unit's cases, and the location Park Street station immediately set off alarm bells. Detective Rossi arrived on the scene, the scent of stale air and something more unsettling hitting her as she entered the storeroom. She was a stark contrast to the gritty environment, her presence sharp and focused. She listened to Marco's account and examined the wall herself. The hollow sound was undeniable. The faint, foul odor was a clear red flag. She immediately ordered the construction work in the area to halt and declared the storeroom a potential crime scene, much to the chagrin of the MBTA officials worried about their project timeline. When you work cold cases, you live on a diet of long shots and gut feelings, Detective Rossi would later state. The location, the hollow wall, the smell. It was too many coincidences. The original investigation searched the public areas and known tunnels exhaustively. But what if they missed something? What if there was a space that wasn't on any of the original blueprints they were working from? A place that had been sealed off and forgotten long before Julie ever disappeared. Rossi brought in the department's forensic imaging unit. They used ground-penetrating radar on the wall, and the results were stunning. The radar revealed a void behind the wall, a small, dark space, approximately 6 feet wide and 10 feet deep. It was not a utility chase or a simple cavity. It appeared to be a room, a chamber, that had been deliberately walled off. There were also faint, irregular shapes inside, densities that were not consistent with rubble or debris. The news was delivered to Eleanor and David Wells with extreme caution. Detective Rossi visited them personally. Her words measured and gentle. She explained the discovery of the anomaly in the station wall, emphasizing that it could be nothing. But for the first time in 14 years, it was something. It was a tangible lead, a physical place to focus their long-dormant hope. Eleanor wept quietly, her hands clasped together, while David sat in stunned silence, the news slowly breaking through the fortress of grief he had built around himself. With the legal authorizations in place, a plan was made. A specialized forensic team would carefully dismantle the wall, piece by piece. The process would be slow and methodical, treating the entire structure as evidence. A new chapter in the mystery of Julianne Wells was about to begin, not with a whisper, but with the resounding crack of a sledgehammer against a wall that had held its secrets for far too long. The question on everyone's mind was terrifying and electrifying. What, or who, had been sealed inside? The air in the disused storeroom was thick with anticipation. A perimeter was established, with temporary barricades keeping the curious public and transit workers at a distance. The space was illuminated by harsh portable floodlights that cast long dancing shadows on the grimy walls. Detective Rossi stood near the entrance, her arms crossed, watching as the forensic team prepared for the breach. The faint, unsettling odor that had first tipped off the construction worker seemed stronger now. A scent that hinted at long-forgotten secrets and the slow, inexorable process of decay. The team leader, a seasoned forensic specialist named Dr. Alan Chen, opted against using a sledgehammer or any crude demolition tools. The goal was preservation, not destruction. He decided to carefully cut out a large section of the wall, treating it like an archaeological dig. Using a specialized saw with a diamond-tipped blade, his team began to meticulously score the plaster and tile, the high-pitched whine of the tool echoing in the confined space. The sound was a jarring intrusion into the 14 years of silence that had enveloped this hidden corner of the station. Eleanor and David Wells had declined to be at the station, the emotional toll of being so close to a potential discovery too much to bear. They waited at home, the silence in their house a stark contrast to the controlled chaos unfolding beneath the Boston Common. Every ring of the phone made them jump. They sat together in their living room, under the gaze of Julie's last painting, united in a shared vigil of hope and terror. The years of waiting had come down to these few hours. a fulcrum upon which their future emotional landscape would balance. As the saw completed its work, the team used pry bars to gently loosen the large rectangular section of the wall. With a groan of protest from the old plaster and a puff of stale, musty air, the section came free. The smell that billowed out was stronger now, a complex and stomach-turning mix of mold, stagnant water, and something else, something cloyingly sweet and foul that spoke of decomposition. The team members, wearing full protective gear and respirators, did not flinch. Their professionalism a shield against the grim reality of their work. Dr. Chen was the first to peer into the darkness with a high-powered flashlight. The beam cut through the blackness, revealing the space beyond. It was a small, roughly finished chamber, its walls made of old brick and mortar. It was clear that this was not a modern construction. It was an artifact of the station's original design, a space that had been sealed and forgotten decades ago. Debris littered the floor, old newspapers, rusted cans, and a thick layer of dust that seemed to swallow the light. The initial sweep of the flashlight beam revealed no immediate signs of human remains. A wave of mingled relief and disappointment washed over Detective Rossi, but Dr. Chen, methodical and patient, continued his visual search. He directed the light into the far corner of the chamber, behind a pile of what looked like discarded burlap sacks. It was there that the light caught on something. It wasn't bone, but something that glinted, reflecting the beam with a small silver flash. Then Chun's light settled on another object, partially obscured by the sacks. It was a book, its cover warped by dampness but its form still recognizable. It was a sketchbook, its pages swollen and stuck together. Rossi's breath caught in her throat. She remembered the detail from the original case file, from the interviews with Julie's parents and friends. Julie was never without her sketchbook. It was an extension of her arm, a repository for her thoughts and observations. Carefully, a forensic photographer documented the chamber from the opening before anyone entered. Every angle was captured, preserving the scene exactly as it was found. The team then set up a portable air filtration system to make the environment safer to enter. The tension was unbearable. The discovery of the sketchbook was a monumental breakthrough, the first piece of physical evidence directly linked to Julianne Wells that had been found since the day she disappeared. She had been in this room. The question was no longer if, but how and why. Dr. Chen and one other specialist, moving with extreme care, finally stepped into the hidden chamber. The floorboards, surprisingly, were mostly solid. They moved toward the corner, their every movement deliberate. Chen knelt down beside the sketchbook and the shiny object. He gently brushed away a layer of dust and grime from the glinting item. It was a small, delicate piece of jewelry, a silver bracelet with a single, intricate feather charm. Detective Rossi, watching from the opening, felt a chill run down her spine. She immediately pulled out her phone and brought up a photo from the Wells case file. It was a picture of Julie, taken by her boyfriend Ben just a week before she vanished. She was smiling, her arm resting on a table, and there, on her wrist, was the unmistakable shape of a silver bracelet with a single feather charm. The contents of this hidden tomb were beginning to tell their story, and it was a story that confirmed their worst fears. Julianne Wells had met her end right here, beneath the feet of millions of commuters, in a room no one knew existed. The discovery of the sketchbook and bracelet transformed the forgotten storeroom from a potential point of interest into the heart of a 14-year-old homicide investigation. The hidden chamber was a time capsule, a sealed environment holding the last, silent moments of Julianne Wells's life. Every particle of dust, every scrap of debris, was now a potential clue. Dr. Chen's team began the painstaking process of excavating the room, treating it with the reverence and precision of an archaeological site. They gridded the floor, collecting and bagging every item for analysis. Detective Rossi made the call to Eleanor and David Wells. It was the hardest call of her career. She confirmed that they had found personal items believed to belong to Julie inside a hidden room at the station. She didn't have to say more. The implication was clear. A 14-year-long vigil of hope for a safe return had just ended, replaced by the grim certainty of loss. A wave of raw, unfiltered grief, audible over the phone line, was a testament to the enduring pain they had lived with for so long. Closure, when it begins to arrive, is often as brutal as the initial wound. Back in the chamber, the team made another significant find. Tucked beneath the burlap sacks where the sketchbook lay was a faded, tattered piece of fabric. As they carefully unfolded it, the distinctive shimmer of sequins, now dull with age and grime, became visible. It was a fragment of the silver flapper dress Julie had been wearing on the night she disappeared. The evidence was now irrefutable. This small, dark, hidden space was the final destination in Julian's journey home. The focus of the forensic team shifted to the floor beneath the sacks. Using soft brushes and small trowels, they carefully scraped away the layers of accumulated filth. It was there, in the darkest corner of the room, that they found what they had been dreading: the uncovered human remains. Due to the conditions in the sealed room, the relative lack of scavengers, but the presence of moisture and bacteria, the body was severely decomposed, but not entirely skeletonized. It was a heartbreaking discovery that nonetheless was a crucial step toward finding the truth. The medical examiner was called to the scene to supervise the recovery of the remains. The process was slow and respectful, conducted with a somber quiet that contrasted sharply with the noise of the active subway station just one wall away. It was a surreal scene, the living city rushing by, completely oblivious to the long-hidden tomb and the tragic story being unearthed from its depths. The remains were carefully transferred to a protected container to be taken for autopsy and, most importantly, formal identification. While the physical evidence was being processed, Detective Rossi began a new line of inquiry. How was this room sealed, and by whom? She pulled the original blueprints of Park Street Station, dating back to its construction in the early 20th century. The room was there, listed as a tool and switch maintenance closet, but on the updated blueprints from a 1970s renovation project, it had vanished. It had been walled over, deemed unnecessary. The tiles used to cover it were consistent with those used in that renovation. This meant the room had been sealed for decades before Julie disappeared. This presented a conundrum. If the room was sealed in the 70s, how did Julie end up inside? The forensic team provided the answer. The section of wall they had removed was different from the rest. The plasterwork was cruder, the tile setting less professional. Dr. Chen's analysis confirmed that the large section of wall had been removed, and then replaced at a much later date. Someone had known about this forgotten room, opened it, and then sealed it again, carefully attempting to match the surrounding wall. The investigation now had a clear focus. Who had the knowledge and the means to do this? Who knew about a room that didn't officially exist on modern plans? Who had access to the station after hours and possessed the tools and skills to break through a wall and then patch it up convincingly? The suspect pool, once a vast sea of millions of Bostonians, was suddenly shrinking to a manageable, specific group of individuals: transit workers, maintenance crews, and contractors who had worked on the system. The sketchbook, though badly damaged by moisture, was sent to a specialized lab for restoration. Technicians worked to carefully separate the pages, hoping to find a final drawing, a name, or a note. The silver bracelet was cleaned, confirming it was the one her parents had given her for her 21st birthday. Every object found in that room was a silent witness. The dress fragment, the bracelet, the sketchbook, they were Julie's final, desperate breadcrumbs, left in a tomb that their owner had believed would never be found. The secret room had given up its most tragic secret, the body of Julianne Wells, but in doing so, it had created a new, urgent mystery. This was not a random crime of opportunity. It was calculated. It required insider knowledge of the station's hidden geography. The person who killed Julie not only took her life, but went to extraordinary lengths to conceal her, creating a makeshift tomb in the heart of the city. Detective Rossi now knew she wasn't just looking for a killer. She was looking for someone who had once held the secrets of the station itself. With the confirmation that the remains were indeed those of Julianne Wells, the cold case officially became a homicide investigation, and Detective Rossi's team began the monumental task of rebuilding a 14-year-old crime scene. The secret room was their ground zero. They now had the where and the what. The challenge was to find the who and the why. They started by re-examining every piece of original evidence through the new, clarifying lens provided by the discovery of the chamber. The original witness statements were revisited with fresh eyes. The account from one commuter, initially dismissed as unreliable, now seemed chillingly prescient. The witness had reported seeing the woman in the flapper dress walking toward the far end of the platform, away from the main waiting area, towards that dark tunnel where the workers go. At the time, with no other evidence, it was a loose thread. Now, it was a critical pointer, suggesting Julie may not have been dragged into the room, but perhaps led there, either by force or under false pretenses. Asterisk, the CCTV footage was sent to a new generation of forensic video analysts. Using advanced AI-powered enhancement software, they were able to deblur the grainy images to a degree that was impossible in 2011. While still not perfect, they managed to isolate a figure standing near Julie moments before she moved toward the end of the platform. The figure was tall, wearing dark clothing consistent with a uniform or work attire. Crucially, the enhanced video showed the individual gesturing toward the service corridor, the same direction the witness had described. The investigation's focus now locked onto MBTA employees and contractors who were on duty or had access to Park Street Station on Halloween night, 2011. Rossi's team compiled a list, cross-referencing old employee rosters, maintenance logs, and contractor sign-in sheets. The list was long, containing dozens of names of electricians, track workers, janitors, and transit police who had worked the late shift. 14 years later, many had retired, moved away, or even passed away, making the task incredibly complex. One name on the list stood out: Arthur Finch. Finch was a maintenance supervisor who had worked for the MBTA for over 30 years before taking an early retirement in 2012, just a few months after Julie's disappearance. His record was clean, but interviews with former colleagues painted a picture of a strange, solitary man. They described him as a tunnel rat, someone who knew the old system's quirks and hidden corners better than anyone. He often worked alone on the night shift and was known for being territorial about the station's maintenance areas. Detectives discovered that Arthur Finch had a workshop in his home's basement. After obtaining a search warrant, they entered a space that felt eerily similar to the hidden chamber. It was filled with old MBTA equipment, discarded signs, and detailed, hand-drawn maps of the subway's oldest tunnels. Tucked away in a dusty toolbox, they found something incriminating: a set of tiling tools and a half-used bag of plaster mix, the chemical composition of which was a preliminary match to the material used to seal the hidden room. The most damning evidence came from the sketchbook. The lab had managed to carefully separate the last few pages, which were fused together by mold. The final drawing was faint and water-stained, but unmistakable. It was a quick, charcoal portrait of a man's face, likely sketched in the moments before her death. The man had sharp, sunken eyes and a distinctive scar on his chin. When Detective Rossi pulled up Arthur Finch's 2011 employee ID photo, it was a perfect match. Julie, the artist, had left them a final, haunting clue. A theory of the crime began to form. Finch, the reclusive maintenance worker, likely encountered Julie on the platform. Perhaps he offered help, or used his authority to lure her into the maintenance corridor under the pretense of a shortcut or a safe waiting area. In the secluded hallway, he led her to the hidden room he knew about from his decades of service. Something went horribly wrong inside that chamber. Whether the attack was premeditated or an opportunity that turned violent, the result was Julie's death. Finch then used his skills and access to conceal his crime. He would have known that sealing the room, which was already off the official blueprints, would be the perfect way to hide a body. He likely returned over the next few nights, during his solitary shifts, to meticulously plaster and tile the opening, confident his work would blend in with the station's grimy walls and his secret would be safe forever. His abrupt retirement a few months later was likely his attempt to distance himself from the place and the crime. The final step was to locate Arthur Finch. Detectives tracked him to a small, remote town in rural New Hampshire where he had been living a quiet life for over a decade. As police cars pulled up his long, unpaved driveway, the aging, reclusive man must have known that the secret he had buried 14 years ago in the depths of Boston had finally found its way to his doorstep. The reconstruction was complete. All that remained was the confrontation and the final, elusive question of why. The confrontation with Arthur Finch was not the dramatic, explosive confession that detectives might have hoped for. When faced with the evidence, the tool marks, the plaster analysis, and the haunting final sketch from Julie's own hand, the 72-year-old man simply crumbled. His decades of silence collapsed under the weight of the truth. In a long, rambling interview at the local New Hampshire police station, Finch admitted to killing Julianne Wells. The who of the mystery was finally solved, but the why remained, a dark and unsettling void. Finch's account of that night was chillingly mundane in its beginnings. He had seen Julie on the platform, admiring her costume and her youth. He claimed he only intended to talk to her, to show her a secret part of the station he was proud of knowing. He used his position of authority to lure her away from the crowd, leading her down the service corridor and into the hidden room. According to Finch, he made an unwanted advance, and Julie, strong and fearless, rebuffed him forcefully and tried to leave. In the struggle that followed, he pushed her, and she fell, her head striking a piece of rusted machinery on the floor. He claimed her death was an accident, a moment of panic that spiraled out of control. But his actions afterwards spoke to a cold, calculated mind. Instead of calling for help, he made the decision to conceal his crime. Over the next several nights, he returned to the chamber, bringing tools and materials from his own workshop to painstakingly seal her inside her tomb. He spoke of the process with a chilling detachment, as if describing a routine repair job. His motive was not one of deep-seated malice, but of a pathetic and selfish desire to preserve his own quiet life, at any cost. For David and Eleanor Wells, the news of the arrest and confession brought a complex and agonizing form of relief. They finally knew who had taken their daughter's life, and they knew she had not suffered at length. But the reason for her death, a random, pathetic encounter that ended in a fatal push, was almost impossible to comprehend. There was no grand conspiracy, no jilted lover, just a lonely, disturbed man and a moment of senseless violence. Their 14-year search for answers had led to a truth that was both banal and profoundly tragic. Arthur Finch was charged with second-degree murder and improper disposal of human remains. Given his age and the overwhelming evidence against him, he pled guilty, avoiding a painful trial for the Wells family. He was sentenced to life in prison, destined to live out his remaining days behind walls of his own making, a parallel to the tomb he had created for Julie. Justice, in its legal sense, had been served, but the emotional justice for her family remained elusive. The discovery brought a measure of closure, but not peace. How could it? Closure implies a circle being completed, a wound being healed. For the Wells family, the wound would always remain. They now had a grave to visit, a place to lay flowers for their daughter. They held a memorial service, where friends and family finally had the chance to mourn her properly, sharing stories of her vibrant life, her infectious laugh, and her incredible artistic talent. The echoes of who she was, once a source of pain, were now a source of comfort. The city of Boston was captivated and horrified by the resolution of its most famous cold case. It served as a stark reminder of the secrets that can lie hidden just beneath the surface of everyday life. In the forgotten corners of familiar places, the MBTA conducted a full audit of all its properties, ensuring that no other hidden spaces could be used for such nefarious purposes. The story of Julianne Wells became a permanent, tragic part of the city's history, a cautionary tale of a life stolen too soon. In the end, it was Julie's own passion that provided the final piece of the puzzle. Her instinct as an artist to observe and record the world around her, to quickly sketch the face of the man who approached her, was the key that unlocked her own murder case. It was a final, defiant act of communication from beyond the grave, a testament to a spirit that could not be entirely extinguished, even when sealed in darkness. Her art, which was her life, ultimately provided the answer to her death. The Wells family established a scholarship in Julie's name at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, ensuring that other young, passionate artists would have the opportunity to pursue their dreams. It was their way of creating a legacy for her, of turning their immense loss into something positive and enduring. Her art, once confined to their home and her old apartment, was now celebrated, with a local gallery hosting a posthumous exhibition of her work. The vibrancy and life in her paintings stood in stark contrast to the darkness of her final moments. The story of Julianne Wells is a testament to the enduring power of hope and the relentless pursuit of truth. It is a story about a family's love that never wavered, and a detective's refusal to let a cold case lie dormant. But it is also an unsettling reminder that sometimes the most profound answers don't fully satisfy. The crack in the wall brought a name, a confession, and a resting place for Julie, but it could never explain the randomness of fate, nor could it ever restore the brilliant life that was so senselessly extinguished in the depths of a subway station 14 long years ago.